Welcome to the Kansas City Star Forum on Race and Sports. I'm Star sports writer Blair Kirchhoff. When friend and colleague Vahe Gregorian and I batted around the idea of a panel discussion a couple of weeks ago, we exchanged names for panelists and came up with a wish list. Our wish came true. We asked 6 people who are prominent and impactful on the Kansas City sports scene to participate, and we received 6 yeses. We took that as a strong indication of the importance of the issue and where we are as a society exactly 1 month after the killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis white police officer. So much has happened since then: protests, police reforms, the removal of symbols like statues of those with racism in their backgrounds. And although little has happened in the way of sports action because of the COVID-19 pandemic, sports have very much been part of the news over the past month. We're here to talk about that and the role sports has played and can play in our progress. Let me introduce the panel. Christiana Carr is a junior basketball player at Kansas State. She's a 2-year starter and was an all Big 12 freshman selection in 2019. She's our youngest panelist and has been incredibly active over the past month. We'll talk about that in a moment. Welcome, Christiana.
Hello.
Tyrann Mathieu was voted the Chiefs' most valuable player in his first year on the team. All he did from his safety position and everywhere else he roamed on the defense was help Kansas City win its first Super Bowl in 50 years. Thanks for joining us, Tyrann.
Thanks for having me, Blair.
Dayton Moore is the Royal Senior Vice President for Baseball Operations and General Manager, and he's especially a happy and busy man today. Baseball is back with Spring Training 2.0 set to begin next week. Welcome, Dayton.
Thanks, Blair. Great to be with you.
Cuonzo Martin's teams go to the NCAA tournament wherever he coaches. He's won nearly 60% of his games in a dozen years and had Missouri playing its best basketball when the season came to an abrupt end. Welcome, Cuonzo. Hey,
Thank you for having me.
There you go. Welcome, Cuonzo. Hey, Bill Self entered the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame in 2017. He'll begin his 18th season as the Kansas coach next year. His teams have won 15 Big 12 championships. Hey, Bill.
Hey, guys.
And since 2011, Bob Kendrick has been president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum located at Kansas City's historic 18th and Vine District. He was gracious enough to invite us to hold this event in the building at the Field of Legends. There would have been no better place to have this discussion, but the pandemic forced our hand. Hi, Bob, and keep us in mind for next time.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be part of this distinguished group of people.
Very good. Okay, we're going to start with a question for the group that I'd like everyone to take a swing at, and it's this. As we've seen or even participated in protests and absorbed all the news over the past month, I'm wondering how the events have stirred your emotions or inspired you or even awakened you. And I'd like to ask each of you to answer. We'll start with Christiana. You went to Topeka 5 days after George Floyd's death to protest. I want you to tell us about that and the other events you attended over the next few weeks. What compelled you to do that?
You know, honestly, being from Minneapolis area, when I saw the video first hit the news and everyone was kind of protesting and going through all of the violence acts and the looting and the rioting, I wanted to do something, but I knew that it was too dangerous for me to go back home at the time. So when I saw on Facebook that there was a protest in Topeka, I immediately made the decision I was going to go. I made some posters with my friends and we ended up going, and it was a great protest and it was great to be a part of something that was peaceful after all you see on the news is violence and just negative comments about everything that's been going on. And then over the past couple weeks, I went back home to Minnesota and protested with the 10K Foundation, and then helped with donations in North Minneapolis as well. And so it was good to be able to be back home and help out with my friends and family and kind of get things back on the swing of things and moving the needle forward.
You were actually familiar with the store where George Floyd, the area in front of the store where George Floyd was killed. You know that part of town.
Yes, I do. My friend lives right around the corner from it. we would go there and get food. I mean, there's only one Cup Foods in the area, so it's kind of easy to spot out. Once I saw it on video, I immediately knew where that was, being a Minneapolis native. So
Let me ask you this too, Christiana. I saw or read a story where you received tons of positive feedback for what you did, but not all of it was positive. There were some death threats even. And tell us about that.
yeah, I tweeted out about, if you don't support me with supporting Black Lives Matter, then I feel like you shouldn't support me with my sport as well. And I mean, when my mom first told me about it, I was kind of iffy about tweeting it, just about the backlash and everything. And at first I got a lot of positive comments about people supporting me, and talk show hosts quoted my tweet and kind of made a joke about the WNBA and how nobody watches it. And immediately after that, I had tweets about people saying that I should burn in the city of Minneapolis. They don't support me in either. They don't know what women's basketball is. And so, I mean, as much hate comments as I've gotten, I've definitely gotten a lot of support with that as well. So, I mean, it shows just how much people that I don't even know that still support me, and that means a lot as well. So.
Very good. Hey, Kanzo, I'm gonna go as you appear on my screen. So, Kanzo, I'm just wondering what the last month has meant to you, and I know that having spoken to you about it, there have been some a march on your campus that you participated in, and just generally tell us what it's meant to you over the last month.
Well, obviously, it was a tough one to see the George Floyd video. And to be totally honest, it was the first video I watched in its entirety, because I've seen those for years. And my stomach just can't take that. I'm not sure, ever since I've had kids, I can't watch those videos. But I watched it through, and it was really tough to watch. And, for me, I have to be totally honest here. When I was at Cal Berkeley, I saw Colin Kaepernick up close when he took the knee, because the camp was probably 45 minutes from the San Francisco 49ers facilities. And, you want to do something, you want to step out, you want to say something, but, truthfully, self-preservation takes over, because you have to provide for your family, you work for a university, so you want to be careful in how you speak. And that was tough for me. So whatever came around again, I was just telling myself, and I was constantly praying to God, I have to get out in front of this some way, shape, or form, because I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois. So I've seen a lot of it up close and witnessed it from afar. So when this time around, I think the thing that helped me with the COVID virus, which is an unfortunate pandemic, it has caused a lot of deaths and anxiety and stress, loss of jobs. But I think what it allowed all of us to do, time stop, so we can all see it. So there's not a sporting event the next day to go to. And I think that really helped me to get out in front of this thing, because, everybody was asking, how should you respond? Should you tweet this, social media? And it took me about a week. I didn't know what to say, because you want to be respectful to all, but you understand the situation and the task at hand. So I just said, from this point on, this is who I am, and it has to be a part of my life, and I have to get out in front of this. And this is, I said to my sons respectfully, I just said this about a week or so to my two sons, one's 22, one's 18. And I just said, guys, I don't know if I'll be on this earth to see total equality, but I pray that my grandkids, if God willing, that they can have a peaceful life. But I said, I didn't say like there was threats. I'm not worried about threats, but I just felt like I'm not sure I'll be able to see that, because when you're talking percentage and you study history, in the Black communities and in the communities of colors, there's probably a 70-year wealth gap. And there's a lot of catching up to do. So I just told my sons, I'm gonna do everything in my power to make sure my grandkids can live a peaceful life.
Very good. Hey, Tyron, I know that speaking of the Colin Kaepernick situation of 3 or 4 years ago, that you may have had a similar reaction, and there just seemed to be not a split, but a stronger disagreement among players in the NFL about it. That doesn't seem to be the case now, after the video that you and other NFL stars put together, including Patrick Mahomes. But Roger Goodell came out with an apology in the next day or so. Tell us, how about some of your thoughts on the past month and how your feelings about Kaepernick evolved?
Yeah, I think for me, seeing the death of George Floyd, we've been able to see so many videos, since social media, and we've become traumatized. A lot of us have become numb in some cases, and I think for me, it's just you get tired of seeing the same old thing. especially to your people. I think that's first and foremost. I think something needs to be done, towards police reform, towards, educating minorities on the laws, on police reform, different things like that. And I feel like we have a long way to go. And I feel like we're going to be stronger together. And I think this opportunity, or really these last few months, have given us the opportunity to come closer, right? To have conversations and to be honest, to be open, and to ultimately be real with each other, and be sensitive as well. And even speaking from an NFL player's perspective, I think in hindsight, we feel like we let Colin Kaepernick down. For a lot of us, we were focusing on self, and we were focusing on our careers, and not necessarily understanding the true impact, we could really make on, really bringing about social change. I feel like we have one of the biggest platforms in the world. We can reach a lot of people. We can inspire a lot of people. I thought the Black Lives Matter video that we did, I thought initially it did something for us as players, right? To see guys like Roger Goodell step up and say that he was wrong, and say that he may have made a mistake, in his decision making. To see different owners step up, to see coaches lead the way, to give their players the floor to express, how they're feeling. I think so much of what we do in sports is psychological, and if all of us could kind of get into each other's mind for the better, I think it can only, bring great change. And I think sports could absolutely do that for the world. We don't need to wait on any other entity to do, what we can do. I think if you look at sports, or you look at teams, a lot of those people don't come in there thinking about religion. They don't come in there thinking about the color of your skin. It's a common goal, right? It's something that we all want to reach. And, teams, sports, we have the ability to show the world, what we do on a daily basis, put a lot of things to the side, work well with each other, begin to love each other, begin to grow with each other. I got guys that come from the other side of the earth, me, and I'm still those guys' friends to this day. We come from different backgrounds, but yet sports have, it brought us to a common ground. And I just pray each and every night that the world will really see, who we are on a daily basis, and be inspired by that.
Very good. Hey, Dayton, I know that you have gotten or attempted to talk with a lot of people, gotten in people's minds about what they're about, and I'm thinking specifically of the prisons that you have visited over the years, and we know all about, and we'll talk to Bob also about this, the Urban Youth Academy at the Negro Leagues Museum, behind the Negro Leagues Museum. But I was really curious about your experiences visiting prisons, seeing people of all colors and all backgrounds. But what did you glean from that, and how has that helped you form your viewpoints?
Well, Blair, let me just say it's a privilege to be in this setting with this group of people, and because we all have a great heart for the next generation. This is what this is all about, and we definitely have to do better. And I think we've always known that there's injustices in the world. We've seen the injustices in the world, but I think for the first time, and to Konzo's point, maybe it was COVID-19 that made us stop and reflect, but I think for the first time, our hearts felt the injustices. And that's why I'm so positive and optimistic about change. But, I was asked this question quite a bit about some of the protests and some of the rioting and the destruction of property and some of the violence that was taking place. And there's nobody with a sane mind that condones violence and destruction of property. We hurt for those individuals. But when you spend time in the prisons with men from all walks of life that have been incarcerated, and you hear their stories and you listen to their journey and you try to feel their hearts, you can understand why things lead to destruction and why things sometimes become violent. And so what we've learned from that is the importance of of understanding and listening to other stories. And so we're not very good as human beings to articulate emotion and feelings. We're oftentimes not very good about that. And so sometimes words get in the way of understanding each other's hearts. And so I think that's where it begins and ends, in trying to understand what others have been through and what they've experienced in life. So that's some of the things that our prison visits and ministry has taught us.
Hey, Bill, how about the last month? What's it been about for you and your observations and just how has it talked to you?
Well, I think that obviously it affected everybody that witnessed what occurred in Minneapolis in a way that brought along anger, sadness, so many different emotions, because we witnessed a murder right there before our eyes. The thing that I have probably learned more in this month, as far as trying to educate myself and research and studying, thinking as a basketball coach and being in the most diverse groups, that maybe I had a pretty good handle on things. And I realize now I really didn't have near as good a handle on it as what I thought I did, in so many ways. Me personally, I've spent quite a bit of time listening to podcasts, watching documentaries, watching certain movies, and putting myself in a position to see totally the perspective that others come from, just as others should see the perspective that others different than them come from. And it's been education. My players have been great. I'm sure Konzo's done the same thing, talked to his players, and this was a time, I think, that as a coach and a leader, that it's time for me to maybe, although we've been vocal to a pretty strong extent, but maybe allow my players and encourage my players to have the voice and have me stand with them, as opposed to standing in front of them and having them always stand behind me. I'm looking forward to our players getting back. I'm looking forward to words becoming actions. I'm looking forward to doing different things in our university, in our community, that can make this a much better place. And I do think the words have been great, and COVID has probably tempered some action, just because of the ability to be together and do things as a group. But I'm looking forward to us putting some words into action. And I do think we have a platform, to what Tyron said, to really make a difference, even if not on a national or world scale like many can, but we can certainly make a difference in our own communities, in our own state.
That's right.
Bob, how about you? You're the president of a place that everybody who goes there just falls in love with it if they're not familiar with it, and you tell a story that's so unique, and you tell it so well. And I just wanted to ask you how the events of the past month have impacted you.
Well, just like all the other guests, your emotions span the gamut. When you watch that video, if you don't feel that, you have no soul. And so you go through, I think, an array of emotions that went from disbelief to outrage to sadness. And then you move into a realm of hope and determination. And for me, it stems from seeing young folks who are likely engaged in this kind of effort, really to this degree, Blair, for the first time ever. And I relate a story. My young kid that works for us, who goes to Chicago, University of Chicago, was part of the Plaza protest. And the situations occurred where the police had to use tear gas, or felt they had to use tear gas. And I told her grandfather, who's a golf buddy of mine, I said, you know what? 20 years from now, that tear gas episode is going to be a badge of honor, because she stood up for something that she believed in. And so when I see Christiana and I see Tyran and I see so many other young people who are engaged. That's what gives me that optimism that this time there is this possibility for us to actually impact and make the needed change that has to occur. It was so painful and so vile and so vivid in front of so many who maybe they're not impacted, even though they may believe these things are happening. Sometimes I think folks didn't believe that this stuff was happening. For us as African Americans, it wasn't new. It wasn't new, but it was that kind of vividness and vileness. It just stirred so many emotions in so many people. And for me, and I would imagine the same thing for Kwanzaa and for Tyran, if you grew up, and I grew up in the South, and so, you know, your parents had that conversation with us. And so the whole nature of this mindset of the police to protect and serve has never really been applicable in the African-American community. You know, it was always this level of distrust and fearfulness for the very things that we witnessed, when it shouldn't be. You know, it should be indeed protect and serve. But you are prepared as a kid growing up in the South of everything that you needed to do, or as I call them now, survival skills. But again, I think we have this wonderful opportunity to see change occur because we've got so many who are now stepping to the front line of this issue, addressing it for what it is, a real issue in this country. And it's not easy to talk about. You know, it's not supposed to be easy. And we have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, and that's the way we have to look at it. And that's why here at the museum, you know, that's why I say there's no better place to have this conversation than the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, which is is a story of social justice. And it's a story of civil rights, as you well know, as seen through the lens of baseball.
Right. Kwanzaa, I'm curious, you have just recently in the last few weeks had the Columbia Chief of Police over to speak to your team, and I'm wondering what you were hoping to get from that, and what was the reaction from your team to that exercise?
Well, it was probably 5 days after George Floyd, and again, we do this all the time, not necessarily police officers every week, so I don't want to create that type of picture or that atmosphere. But we had the chief, I met with him. I just said, I think it'd be very important that you come on with our guys. He was excited to do it. And when he came on, so I didn't tell the guys that he was coming on. So when he came on, some of the guys are looking like, man, you know, they're frustrated, upset, and most of the guys at home. And I just let him go. So before he got on, I just said, Chief, man, you do it how you need to do it. I'll sit back and I'll follow your lead. It can get uncomfortable, but he was excited about it. He said, hey, Coach, I'll say some things, they might get upset. I'm with them. I understand how they're feeling, but let's get through this thing together. And I thought it was great. And that thing went probably about an hour and a half, which is a long time, because I try to keep our guys no longer than 30 minutes. But also go back to why I felt like it was pertinent to have them on, because we do a Zoom call with my family on my side of the family. There's probably 25 or 30 of us on the Zoom call, and my mom is on the call. And so when that happened that Sunday, all the moms, everybody talking. So when it came my mom's turn, she said the word sorry cannot bring my son back. And I think we have to take that into account. When that happens, all of a sudden you make a quick decision. And I've always said, now you can ask my players, I've always promoted my players to try to get in law. I hate to say law enforcement, but to try to become police officers, because I think there's no better person that can be a police officer than someone that's been a part of sports. They understand camaraderie, understand team, they understand leadership. They've been in situations, they understand people. That's all walks of life. But when my mom said that, because again, my brother spent 10 years in prison. So when my mom said that, it really hit me, because we've never talked on that level. But when she said that as a mother, and I could see her face when she's saying it, and my mother always tried to maintain her emotions when we're around, but I can see it, and I just kind of looked away, you know, because I've never really seen her get emotional at the level. And you sit there now, look at my sons, it's like, my sons doesn't understand the world that I grew up in. I mean, just every day. And not that it was violence all over the place, but it just, for our guys, just be transparent. And I told our guys, man, if you feel like protesting, whatever it is you want to do, I'll follow your lead, man, because this is your stage. And I think for all of us, we have to understand one thing. and I tell people all the time when they say that was a peaceful protest. Well, what does that mean? I mean, I just think then that was a gathering. I mean, so I think if there's no script to a protest, whatever happens, it happens. And you don't want chaos, but we have to understand you have to allow people to be free, because if I didn't have to protest, then that means there wasn't an issue. I'm protesting because there's an issue.
Right. Tyron, I wanted to ask you about growing up also in the South, in New Orleans, in a difficult situation. And I'm wondering how that shaped your views on race and progress, and how when you look back on that time of your life, what was it about that what was it? How did you get out of that, and what inspired you?
Yeah, well, I say first and foremost, my whole life I've been blessed to have really great people come into my life and, really put their hand on my shoulder and try their best to really guide me. I think growing up in the South, we were scared of the police. We didn't necessarily think that those people were there to help us. I think the best thing that really happened for me, or that could have happened for me, I was able to go to a historically all black private school, a Catholic school in St. Augustine, and that place taught me how to be proud of who I am as a black man. It also showed me, what I was up against, and how hard it would be to escape our environment and to, provide a better life for the people around us. And, I always think back to that, and I'm so grateful for that. And I really wish everybody could have that experience to know who they are, to know where they come from, to understand their people and also other people as well. And I thought that school did that for me. Obviously, aside from God, and religion, it teaches you grace, for others. It teaches you how to serve others. And I wish everybody had that opportunity, that I had. But I think growing up in the South, it was extremely difficult. I think the environments that we're in, it's hard. I think the opportunities, the resources we have, in urban America is limited, and either it's sports, or, maybe you're an entertainer, or, maybe you're one of the smartest guys to be able to go to a great school, but it's just few of us. And I feel like it can be so much more. And, so that's why I want to get out in front of this thing. I feel like, the school I came from, the place I came from in New Orleans, Louisiana, has really prepared me to be able to accept who I am as a person, but also show grace to others, right? And to try to help others, see it how I see it, and me being able to see it how they see it. And, hopefully we could be better for each other all the way around.
Hey, Bill, just to refer to something you said earlier, what you do and where you do it, you have an opportunity to be a leader in the community. And I'm just wondering, what can that look like? What kind of tangible results could you see by being that person, taking an active role in the community? And the reason I bring this up is I was on an NABC webinar a couple of weeks ago, and I heard Kelvin Sampson and John Calipari and several other coaches speak to this issue, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And one of the suggestions was it was opportunity, not just for coaches, but maybe at that second level of, assistant athletic director, trainer, sports information. You don't see many Blacks in those roles, and perhaps there's an opportunity there to scout that and to help create those opportunities.
Well, I think that, you touched on a lot of things right there, and Gonzo knows that. I mean, we certainly have a sincere shortage of minorities, primary Blacks, having the same opportunities that whites do in the sports that provide our living, livelihood, entertainment, and there's some things that I believe that can be done to improve those and provide more opportunities without question. Of course, you go deep into just one thing, just to touch on that, we've got to have more opportunities for young people to get involved in our profession. If college basketball is primarily made up of Black kids at a high level, and that go on and want to play professional sports, basketball, whatever, and then they want to get into coaching, there's not opportunities for those guys to get into coaching now. So we've got to do some things, I think, through legislation that can help promote certain things like that, and certainly it can at the highest administrative level as well. I think that some of the things that we can do on campus, I think that coaches need to have a voice. I think all coaches need to have a voice. This is not in my eyes, this is not a Black thing. It's not a white thing. This is a we thing, and we all need to have a voice to express the value and the importance of equity amongst each other, and the respect that we should have for each other. And certainly I feel like, as the basketball coach at Kansas, I have an opportunity to probably have as strong a voice in that in our community as maybe anybody does, just like all you guys do in your fields. And the thing about it is, kids today are so much smarter than kids were, myself and others that I hung with back in the day. They're so much more educated. They're the opportunity to learn, access to information. You may bring this up later, but hey, I grew up in Oklahoma. We didn't study the race riot Tulsa race riot in 1921 in Oklahoma history, at least that I remember. And to think that the access that we have now to put our players and other students on a platform to be heard, where it's done in such a way that it draws us closer together. I think that coaches can help spearhead all that. I think we need to encourage all of our players to understand there is absolutely zero consequences, negative, for you to have the stand or for you to feel how you feel. It's okay to feel how you feel and to present that in a way. And kids have confidence to do so. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do. I think there's so many things in athletics. I know there's been so much talk, Tyrann, about football and opportunities for head coaches. I believe there's 4, if I'm not mistaken, the National Football League, minorities. And of course, I'm not an expert, not going to go into that, but how can that be? And how can that be in college basketball as well? There's things that need to happen that certainly would help change in some scale just how everything is viewed. And certainly I think we all play a role in helping to develop that.
Hey, Dayton, you give so many kids opportunities at the academy, and it's not just it's the Urban Youth Academy, but it's not just for urban kids. I know that you have been, it's your desire to have kids from the suburbs, from rural areas, all participate in baseball and softball at the Urban Youth Academy. What do you see as the great value of that?
Well, I mean, that's the mission of the UIA. I mean, we want to bring the urban and the suburban and the rural parts of our community together through the game of baseball and softball, and get these kids growing up together and playing together and competing with each other for one another. And so, that's been the vision from the very beginning, but we've learned so much in that journey, Blair. I mean, when we began to talk about this in the community, we began to break down barriers, and we learned right away that there's a lot of hurts, and the community wasn't real thrilled, some parts of the community, about having kids from the suburbs, white kids from the suburbs, playing in the 18th and Vine area. Didn't want them in the area. And so when we would begin to discuss that, we would have conversations that were similar to this. And we would say, look, we're so sorry you feel the way you do. And we're gonna listen, and we're gonna commit to do better. And so, but how do we as a group make sure that your children and your grandchildren and my children and grandchildren don't grow up and feel the same way that you feel? What can we do different? How can we utilize the Urban Youth Academy to make sure that we do better in the future? And so you know, that's really the mission of what we do. And then to be able to have it right next to the Negro Leagues Museum, to have a civic treasure like the Negro Leagues Museum right there in our own backyard where the UIA is, and somebody like Bob Kendrick, who tells this story so well and is able to unite people and bring people together through the stories of the Negro Leagues. I mean, so it's just a perfect fit to do all that and to accomplish all that. But to piggyback on what Bill said, you know, Major League Baseball, we have done a very poor job. And it's hurtful because it's been a directive that we've been given for the last 27 years since I've been in professional baseball. And as we sat at the GM meetings last November, I sat next to Kenny Williams, who's an African-American gentleman, president of the Chicago White Sox. I said to Kenny, I said, Kenny, look around this room. I said, you're seeing the same thing I see. And I said, Kenny, I've got to ask you this. How does this make you feel? And Kenny's hurt, and we're all hurt because of it. We've got to do better. And so we've got to create succession plans. The only reason any of us get to sit here on this panel is because we had mentors in our life come alongside of us and help us navigate through things, shape us and mold us. And so we have to be able to do that. We've got to reach down and shape and mold young players and young people to be executives, to be coaches, to be instructors, to be journalists, to be trainers, whatever the case may be. And so we've got a responsibility to do that. And, you know, we've got to put all of our energies into that, into the next generation. And I told our group the other day, I'm not concerned about winning one more baseball game. I'm concerned about getting this right going forward. Our legacy in Kansas City needs to be, what have we done to include others and to give opportunities for others who have been disadvantaged? And the last thing I'll say, I was raised as a coach, and I was always told that the cream will rise to the top. The cream will always rise to the top. But in leadership, I've learned that's not always the case. There are people in our communities and in our country that start on second base and third base, and they act like they hit the double or the triple. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with what type of family you were born into, what your color of skin is. And there's many who have been disadvantaged, and we have to do a better job of mentoring, speaking up, and providing a way for others to succeed so they have hope.
Christiana, I see you nodding your head to a lot of this. I just want to ask you, as someone who's a college student on the panel, the only college student in your life, the way your life has been shaped, and the leadership, the mentorship that you had. Do you find that there needs to be more people of color in those positions? And I think I saw a stat the other day that there are more white male women's basketball coaches than there are Black female women's basketball coaches at the college level.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to kind of go off of, I definitely agree with a lot of the things Coach Self was saying about having coaches stand behind their players. I mean, to be able to have a coach that understands that not every time players need to stand behind them, and in situations like this, coaches are willing to stand behind their players and follow their lead. I think that's a big thing. Most definitely, I do feel like there are a lot of still firsts for African Americans to be in high positions. And I feel like, as a 20-year-old female athlete, I do think that is crazy to me. Growing up with both my parents, my mom is white and my dad is Black. I've had the talks with my dad about the typical, what do you do when you get pulled over? But then from my mom's side of it, she doesn't necessarily understand. And so I've gotten both of those sides where I've had to get educated, and then I've also had to educate my mom. Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot of run-ins with that over the last couple of years, just me growing into the woman that I am. And I feel like this situation has definitely opened her eyes a lot. And she's taken the position to, follow my lead with this and support me with this. And so to have a coach be able to do that is definitely nice. I mean, to be able to have people of African Americans in those positions, it does help. It does help have connections. Me being an African American woman, it does help to have somebody on the staff that I can go to about those problems. But with that, I do feel like people need to have those hard conversations. Like someone said earlier, we need to be able to educate people so not only African Americans understand, but we get on a level where everybody understands. And I think that is the most important thing, where we get to a position where everybody understands injustice. And not only when people say, I don't see color, I want you to be able to see my color, and I want you to be able to accept it. And I want you to be able to learn, educate yourself, and learn why I am the way that I am, and why I have to move the way that I do and do what I do, from all walks of life. Because just as much as I feel like people need to educate on African Americans, I need to educate on, I've done a lot of research with why people are so closed-minded on this topic. And I've had to educate myself on, okay, how can I better educate them to understand where I'm coming from? And when you're coming from a place of anger and a place of hurt, it's hard to speak up on this topic simply because you're trying not to come at them as, this is how I feel, I'm angry, I'm mad, and you need to feel this, because they're not going to feel it. They're not going to understand unless they're put in that position. And so I feel like moving forward, if you come with a more of an educational approach, I feel like people are going to listen a lot more.
Right. Hey, so I was going to end our discussion today with another group question, and the question was going to be, what would progress look like? How will we know when progress has been made? What are the clues? What are the hints? What are the obvious indicators that progress has been made? And maybe we'll try to do this quickly, because I know we're up against time here. But Bob, do you have a thought on that?
Well, honestly, Blair, I think progress is in progress. Progress begins when we are open and honest with one another. And, a lot of times we believe that if we don't talk about these things, then it must not be happening. And we know that's not true. And so to be able to engage in this manner, to bring a multiplicity of people to the table to address these kinds of issues, that's a sign of progress. And, I always reflect, and maybe that's because of the environment that I work in. Dayton is just so easy for me to reflect on everything that I learned from our friend Buck O'Neill. And the realization that in this world, we have more good people than we do bad people. So oftentimes the good people have sat idle though, and watched bad things happen to others and not been engaged and involved. I think we're seeing a polar shift in that this time around. And I think that's why I have such great hope and optimism that people like Christiana and others will help lead this necessary change. But also to have leaders in our community like Coach Self and Coach Martin and Dayton, because you have a heart for this. This means something to each and every one of us, that we have an opportunity to leave this place better than the way we found it. And so that's, I think, really why I believe that this is part of the progress. And I do think we'll see the systemic change that we all hope to from a legislative standpoint. And if we change some people's hearts along the way, man, more power to us. We hope that we do. But we certainly want to change the things that allow people to abuse the system and keep other people oppressed. And I think we're all committed to doing that. And maybe just along the way, we might change some hearts too.
Well, I think that's a fantastic final thought. And look, so in closing, I just want to thank each of our panelists for participating in this event, and also give a shout out to our production person, Beth Welsh, executive sports editor, Jeff Rosen, and columnist Vahe Gregorian for all the work they put into this. And thank all of you for joining us on Facebook Live. And panelists, it was terrific. Thanks for doing this, and hopefully we'll see progress made.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Guys, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Good luck to everybody.